Hey everybody, today I want to talk about and give my full review of the latest Beatles box set. This is the Beatles 1964 US albums in mono, and this is the tale of two box sets. Now, I originally did an unboxing video, which you can watch up here. And in that unboxing video, I unboxed this first box set that was sent to me. I ordered this through Amazon. And there's a reason I ordered it through Amazon is because Amazon has an excellent return policy when it comes to vinyl. So I did the unboxing video for this box, and if some of you watched that, there were right away there were some problems with this box set. The insert for A Hard Day's Night was missing, meaning the insert that has like the little essays written by Bruce Spicer. That was missing, and there were a couple of other like things that looked a little bit fishy to me as far as the way the records looked and stuff like that. Then when I actually was done with the unboxing video, I listened to some of the records. First one I listened to was Meet the Beatles, obviously, because it's the first one in the set. And right away, for the very first song, I Want to Hold Your Hand, there were big problems. I had a big skip on the intro, and then there were numerous skips throughout I Want to Hold Your Hand and into I Saw Her Standing There. In addition, there was like intergroove distortion going on. And then of course, the first thing I did was I checked my setup, checked my tone arm, make sure everything's balanced correctly, the proper weight for my stylus. I had all that stuff, got my indicator out to make sure that the stylus was tracking at the right weight. And everything was perfect. I played some of my other Beatle records. I even played some of the US albums that I have in my collection. I played my Meet the Beatles original mono pressing from the US, and those all played fine. But these records in this particular box set had tons of problems. It wasn't just Meet the Beatles, by the way. It was also the Beatles' second album, big time distortion going on, a lot of skipping. I then went to the Hard Day's Night, same exact thing. And at that point, I didn't even check the rest of them, Beatles Story or Beatles 65 or Early Beatles, because I already knew that I had to return this box. So I did do that, and Amazon right away, they sent me a new one, and I got it actually the very next day. So I gotta say, I'm not a huge supporter of Amazon in the sense of buying like everyday things from Amazon, and I usually want to support my local record shop, which I usually do. When it comes to something like a big box set like this, and because of the quality control recently with not just the Beatles, with so many other box sets that have come out, Amazon is great when you can just return it and they'll send you a brand new one. So here is the new one. By the way, if you're wondering how I know the difference between the bad one and the good one, the bad one was a little bit damaged when they sent it to me right there, so there's that. Okay, let's now talk about the good box set. So, got this, and right away, the very first thing I did, of course, was to check to make sure all the inserts were present, and they all were present in this box set, so that was already good. And then, of course, I listened to Meet the Beatles. Again, I pulled that one out, and played fine. Played almost flawless, is what I would say. There's a little bit of some intergroove distortion, but nothing bad and nothing that I couldn't just live with, is what I'll say. So that was a good sign. Then I, of course, listened to the next record, Beatles' second album. Again, sounded fine, played fine. So then I decided, okay, this is gonna be the good box set. And over the last 2 days, we've had family here. We've been visiting with them, but in between family time, I've been listening to this album, and I've listened to all the records now in here 3 times each, except for the Beatles Story. I will say I listened to the Beatles Story. I listened to the first side of the first record 1 time just to give it an idea of what it sounded like, and I'm not a big fan of that record. So what I want to talk about now, now that we got over the fact about quality control, and by the way, these were pressed by, I believe it's MPO, which is, they're located in France. And I didn't really know much about them previously, but I did some research when I got the first box set to kind of see what was going on here with their quality control. And according to Discogs, from people who have commented on the MPO entry for Discogs, there's been a lot of quality control with them over the years. So that was unfortunate to read. But now we're done with all the quality control and all that kind of stuff, knowing that this box set is intact and all the records play reasonably well, I was able to now form my opinion about this box set. So, by the way, if you want to see, you know, all the contents of this and what's inside or whatever, go check out my unboxing video. In this video, I'm just going to talk about the sound here for each of these albums. First off the bat, let me just say before I even get into Meet the Beatles here, all these records are cut insanely loud. Listen to that again. These are cut so loud. In fact, I think these are the loudest records I've ever heard. And in this case, for these particular albums, it's a really cool thing. These albums were originally cut pretty hot as well in the 1960s, but they're even hotter now. And they've also boosted the bass a lot on these. In some cases, it's really nice. In some cases, it's maybe a little too much. It seems like the highs maybe are boosted as well. So overall, you're just getting a ton more volume with these records. And I mean, as soon as you put the needle down on the very first song, I Want to Hold Your Hand on Meet the Beatles, you know what you're in for. It's just extremely hot. And like I said, that's kind of cool for these records. Anyway, let's get into Meet the Beatles here. Meet the Beatles, the first record released on Capitol Records in the US by the Beatles. And here's the deal. So some of you are not going to like what I'm about to say about these records. And I need to put out a little disclaimer before I really get into this. These are the US albums. They're their own unique thing, and I have a special place in my heart for these albums because these are the albums that my dad had and my uncle had that were passed down to me, and so I definitely have a strong affection for these albums. But what I'm going to say now is based on sound and compared to other Beatle pressings that I have in my collection. When it comes to the overall sound of these new pressings, are they better than any of the other Beatle pressings out there? Yes, they're better than the original Capitol albums that were released in the 1960s. They are hands down, night and day, better than those pressings from the 60s because you get more low end, more mid-range, just more clarity is definitely there. So that's a really good thing. But are they better than like some of the original UK mono pressings? Absolutely not. Are they better than the 2014 mono remasters box set that was released? Not at all, not even close. But for what they are, which is the US Capitol albums, which are their own kind of special thing, they are a great improvement over what we had before. Now, if you are a Beatles fan that you are just a collector and you just want to collect, you know, everything they release, this is a really cool box set. If you are a fan of audio and you want to get like the best sounding Beatle pressings out there, this is not for you in any way. I think you'd be very disappointed. And let me get into some of that. So some of the songs on here do sound pretty good and are very exciting. In fact, they're all exciting sounding. But some sound better than others. I Want to Hold Your Hand does sound really good, has great energy on here, and you can really hear Paul's bass throughout this album. It's really been boosted a lot, and I really like it. For this album, it definitely works, the bass to be boosted. Some of the other ones in here we'll talk about, the bass is maybe a little bit overdone. But yeah, I Want to Hold Your Hand sounds really nice. I Saw Her Standing There sounds pretty good is what I would say. The other thing you need to know about these albums is that a lot of these, the tracks on Meet the Beatles and some of the other albums are actually stereo fold downs. Now, for those of you who don't know what that means, they take a stereo recording and they just combine the left and the right channel to make it a mono recording now. And that's because some of the songs on here at the time, Capitol didn't have the original mono mixes. They just had the stereo masters, so they mixed them down. It's not necessarily a horrible thing, but if you compare like the I Saw Her Standing There fold down mix on here compared to like an original UK true mono mix of the song, you really can hear the difference. There's just something not quite right. It doesn't ruin the song in any way at all on this. And like I said, it's kind of part of the like that charm about the US albums, and that's gonna really come up a lot. I'm sure not in just my review and other people's reviews too. These US albums are just kind of this quirky, weird, charming thing that we've all just kind of accepted, at least a lot of us Americans have accepted. But I think anyone else who didn't grow up with these, it's gonna be harder for them to accept the weirdness of some of these records. The other thing I will say is that some of these songs, they just don't sound right to me. Hold Me Tight on here, it just doesn't sound right. It's distorted, and I don't think it's the fault of the pressing. I think it's the actual just master tape they were working with. So yeah, Hold Me Tight comes across a little bit weird. I Want to Be Your Man also came across a little bit weird to me. It Won't Be Long, All I Gotta Do, also just a little bit weird is how I would describe it. Like a little bit like on the edge of distorting almost. But then songs like This Boy, Till There Was You, and even like Not a Second, or actually Don't Bother Me, sound really nice on here. So overall, Meet the Beatles, obviously just a huge historical album when it comes to the Beatles in America. And it's definitely an improvement over the original Capitol album released in the 1960s. Moving on to the Beatles' second album. This is probably my second favorite album in this collection. It really rocks. This is a full-on rock and roll album. Obviously, it's not what the Beatles had in mind when they put out their albums in the UK. This is compiled by Dave Dexter, who was the head of Capitol Foreign Music or whatever that exact title was. But he did put together a cool rock and roll album here. And I gotta say, Roll Over Beethoven is the first song on here, and it sounds really good. And this is actually one of the only instances where I actually heard some stuff I haven't really heard before, or maybe I didn't notice before. But Paul's bass on Roll Over Beethoven really comes out on this particular pressing. And it's excellent. He's doing a lot of really interesting things I didn't really notice before. It's not just because Roll Over Beethoven is just a pretty much straight ahead, typical Chuck Berry type rockin' song. But Paul's doing some very interesting things on the bass. And they were really able to pull out the bass with the mastering on this particular pressing. So for that alone, it's cool to have this new pressing. And then it's kind of pretty much the same story as with Meet the Beatles. Some of the songs are better than the other ones. One thing I'll point out that I noticed, side 1 is cut really hot for me on this particular pressing. Side 2 is not nearly cut as hot. It's much lower in volume, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just kind of a peculiar thing, why one side would be hotter than the other side. But that just happens when you're dealing with all analog mastering. I should mention, by the way, I don't think I mentioned this before, these are cut 100% all analog signal, cut from the original Capitol master tapes, cut using I believe it's a lathe from like 1971, I believe, that Capitol had. So these are an all analog cut, which is a good thing, of course. You probably already knew that, by the way, but just thought I'd mention it here. Next up, Hard Day's Night. So this is, besides the Beatles Story, it's probably my least favorite album in this collection. The songs just don't sound that good to me. I think that the master tape that they were working with here, some of the songs, I hear like dropouts on certain songs, like I should have known better for sure. It sounds just weird to me. There's like dropouts going on with high end, and that must just be the tape or the original transfer of the tape done at EMI. It just doesn't sound quite as high fidelity as like, you know, a UK pressing or whatever that we're used to hearing. And then of course you get the instrumental versions of the songs by George Martin on here, like This Boy and or they call it Ringo's Theme, and then like instrumental versions of And I Love Her and A Hard Day's Night, and those sound fine. But overall, if I want to listen to A Hard Day's Night, I'm definitely not going to pull this out and listen to this. So yeah, Hard Day's Night. Next up, something new. This is probably the best sounding pressing in at least my box set here. It really sounded good to me. The songs were just jumping out of the speakers, and there is a lot of extra low end on these songs, and they sounded really good. And then of course you get some of the songs from A Hard Day's Night are on this album as well, and they seem to sound better here to me than they do on the Hard Day's Night album. Again, I don't know if I already mentioned this or not, but these were cut extremely loud. If I had to have one criticism, I would say that there might be a little bit too much high end on here. At times, some of the stuff was kind of shrill, like I'll Cry Instead, and like Tell Me Why, for example, it seemed like there was a lot of high end going on there, maybe a little too much. Granted, I think that was maybe how the original master tapes were, so you can't really blame, I guess it's Kevin Reeves, is that Kevin Reeves? Is that how you say his name? Who did the cutting of these new pressings. You can't really maybe blame him for that, but just small criticism, like I said. But yeah, within this collection, I think this is probably my favorite as far as the overall sound goes, would be Something New. Yeah, so there you go. The Beatles Story. Like I mentioned earlier, I only listened to the first side of the first record. This is a double album, of course, and it's just, you know, it's an interview, documentary style radio show type thing of the Beatles, and I know a lot of people love this, and it brings back memories from their youth, and that's totally cool. And this is exclusive with the box set. So you can't get this one on its own. All the other ones you can pick up on their own at your local record shop or wherever. So do I regret getting the box set just to have this? No, because I got the box set because I wanted just the box set. I wanted to have them all together. And I know it was like $130 more than if you would have just bought all the albums individually. And I know that it doesn't add up, doesn't make any sense. But sometimes when you're a Beatle collector, things just don't make sense. And I'm okay with that. So, The Beatles Story. Next up, we have Beatles 65. This one also sounded really good. I think it was right behind Something New for me. Again, though, the high end on this was pretty shrill at times. And that did get to be a little bit grating on my ears. I should mention too that I listened to all these one time with a headphone listen, and then the other two times I listened on my speakers. I just like to get that kind of, I know it's better to listen on speakers, at least I think it's better to listen on speakers because you get truer bass and all that kind of stuff. And you get, you know, the presence of the room and all that. But headphones, it's nice to listen to too because you really can dial in on certain details, especially like the condition of the record and the pressing, all that kind of stuff. But on headphones especially, listening to this, it did get to be a little bit like, my ears got a little fatigued after a while with the high end. But the good news about this particular album is that these are all true mono mixes. None of these are full downs like some of the other records. So that was really nice. And again, there's just like a little bit of a different vibe than we're used to hearing from like the UK versions of these songs. And of course you get She's a Woman and I Feel Fine with the tons of reverb. I personally kind of like them. I know that's not what the Beatles wanted, and I'm sure a lot of people think it's just horrible that all that reverb was added. But I sometimes like that. It's just a different way to listen to those songs. And the other cool thing about this album is the song I'll Be Back, which of course was on the UK Hard Day's Night album. It's on the Beatles 65 here. It is a different mix, and I didn't actually know that before. It talked about it in this essay here. It's a different mono mix that George Martin made, and it has a little bit of extra reverb added that George Martin added to that particular mix. And I guess it runs a little bit slower, like slightly slower. So nice to know that it's a slightly different mix, and I just didn't know that before. So Beatles 65, again, sounded really, really good to me. And last but not least, the early Beatles. And unfortunately, again, with this particular pressing, Capitol didn't have the master tapes for this. They just, the mono master tapes, they had the stereo. So I think all but 2 of these songs are fold downs, stereo or mono fold downs, which is a little bit upsetting, but oh well. Again, sounded fine to me, but if I want to listen to these songs, really, I just want to listen to the UK version of Please Please Me. But yeah, it's cool they included it. The other kind of odd thing about this is that all these albums, except for Beatles Story, were released in 1964, which is why this box set is called 1964 US Albums in Mono. The Early Beatles was released in 1965. So it's a little bit peculiar as to why they would include this. And I guess if they were trying to say like, oh, well, the songs were from 1964, that's not even true. These songs were recorded in 1963. I'm sure a lot of you know that. So I don't really know why they included this in the box set, but they did, and here it is. And yeah, I guess it's fine to have it, but it's not one of my favorite Beatles compilations, is what I'll call it. In this box set, it just sounds fine, is what I would say. So overall, this box set was, I kind of knew going into this what to expect, just because the Capitol albums have never sounded great. That is just a fact. And while it was really good to know that they were going to use the original master tapes and they were going to cut these with an all analog signal, they did it the right way, I'll say. So for fans of the original US albums that grew up with these albums, this is probably an awesome box set. And a big improvement over their original Capitol albums. But if you're a big time, Beatle collector, that you're trying to get the best sounding Beatle pressings out there, then this would be a big disappointment for you. And I think for me, it wasn't necessarily a big disappointment, but it's not like a home run for me at all. If I had to rate it out of 10, I'd probably give it like a solid 6. It's nice to have these in better conditions. It's nice to have the sleeves, the jackets in like mint condition. That's really nice. The essays that come with each of the records, they're fine. They're nothing special though. Like I read them all once. I'm never going to read them again probably. There was hardly any new information, is what I would say. By the way, I love Bruce Spicer. I'm not putting him down at all. He has amazing, amazing books on the Beatles. But these particular essays in each of these albums, it just seemed like it seems they could have done more. It would have been nice to have an actual book that came in the box set, just to put all the essays into a book, include a little bit, maybe some extra pictures and stuff like that. That would have been really cool. And overall, this box set for me, it was just fine, is what I would say. It was a little bit frustrating at first, of course, to get the first box set, and the quality control was just not there. It was just kind of a lemon of a box set. But getting the replacement box set, it did lift my spirits quite a lot, and made me feel better about it. But hopefully all of you are enjoying it if you picked it up, and hopefully your record's all in good shape and the pressings are okay and the quality control isn't completely horrible. Unfortunately, I have read from some friends on Instagram and just elsewhere on the internet have told me some slightly horror stories of some of their box sets. Like I had some people who they got in the Beatles' second album, the actual record wasn't the Beatles' second album, it was the Early Beatles, so they got two pressings of the Early Beatles. Some people were also missing some of the inserts. Some people had like big time damage to some of their sleeves and just a lot of bad stuff. And of course, some of their pressings as well were skipping bad. Some of them were a little bit warped. So the quality control for this box set sounds like it's not all that great. But luckily, after, again, the replacement box set, I was able to have a box set that was nice and plays well, and it is a welcomed addition to my collections. So those are my thoughts on this box set, and I hope you enjoyed checking this out, and I hope you will go out and maybe pick up just one of these albums by themselves, give them a chance, and enjoy the US Capitol versions of these Beatles albums. So that's it for now. Take care, and bye for now.